Over 100,000 apartments, houses, and other structures have flooded in Houston since the Memorial Day flood in 2015. Believe it or not, some of those structures flooded twice or even 3 times since 2015. In this video, I will give you 5 pointers that will help you rent a Houston house or apartment that won't flood when Houston has its next big rainstorm or hurricane. Welcome to this episode of Better Apartment, Better Life. I am your host, Jack, the Apartment Guru. In previous episodes, I explained that I've been a Houston landlord for 33 years and that I've run thousands of apartments during that time. In previous videos, I gave many pointers on how you can find an awesome apartment community for yourself and your family without breaking the bank. In this episode, I would like to begin by first discussing some background information about Houston flooding. Unfortunately, the Gulf of Mexico coast, where Galveston and Houston are located, is prone to flooding. And there's no question that significant weather events, including floods, have become much more common everywhere in the past decade. Experts talk about the 100-year flood zone, and basically a building that is located inside the 100-year flood zone has a 1 in 100 chance of experiencing a significant flood in any 1 year. To put it a different way, a house located in a flood zone is likely to experience one big flood every 100 years. Whether a structure falls within the 100-year flood zone is largely determined by history of flooding in that area. But unfortunately, it appears that Houston has not read the history books, given that Houston has experienced 4 such 100-year floods in the past 8 years. These were the so-called Memorial Day flood in 2015, the Tax Day flood in 2016, Hurricane Harvey in 2017, and Storm Imelda, September of 2019. According to the flood experts, Houston should have had just one of these events in the last 100 years, but instead Houston had 4 of these events in a period of just 5 years. The most severe flood event was Hurricane Harvey in 2017, which dumped more than 50 inches of rain in some parts of Houston in just a few days. My own house got 38 inches of rain in just 4 days. And just to put that in perspective, average rainfall in Houston is about 50 inches per year. So during Hurricane Harvey, several areas in Houston got a full year's worth of rain in less than a week. Thousands of structures were flooded by each one of the above storms, and worryingly, many of the structures that flooded were not located within the 100-year flood zone. This made it clear that the 100-year flood maps were not very useful in predicting which structure was likely to flood. Sadly, these 4 storms together killed hundreds of Texans and caused over $100 billion worth in property damage. These 4 storms also made it pretty clear that such severe flood events were likely to happen every 5 to 10 years, not every 100 years. With that background in mind, let me now share with you 5 ways to avoid renting an apartment that is likely to flood. Point number 1, ask the property's leasing staff. I know that may sound strange because you might think the property staff won't tell you the truth, but a recent Texas law, specifically Texas Property Code Section 92.0135, actually requires every apartment complex to inform prospective renters in writing whether the property is in the 100-year floodplain, and second, whether the unit that you want to rent has flooded in the previous 5 years. If a property does not give you this legally required notice, they're not following Texas law, and you might want to think twice about renting there. Point number 2, read the property's online reviews. Because Houston has not had any major flooding recently, it's unlikely that reviews in 2020 through 2023 will discuss flooding. But if you go back to reviews in 2019, when Houston had Storm Imelda, the reviews for a property you're interested in are likely to mention if that property flooded. Even better, if the property's reviews go back to August or September of 2017, when Houston had Hurricane Harvey, those reviews are very likely to mention whether apartments in that property flooded during Harvey. Unfortunately, some properties may not have reviews going back to either 2017 or 2019. Here's my third pointer for you. Check with tenants who lived at the property in 2017 or 2019. In order to track down one of those tenants, tell the leasing agent you're concerned about flooding, and would the leasing agent give you the names and phone numbers of a couple of residents who were living at the property in 2017 or 2019. The property staff will likely tell you that they can't share that information for, quote, privacy reasons, but you can respond, of course, I know you need to check with the resident to make sure it's okay with them for you to give me their contact information. If the property never calls you back with that info, well, that leaves a question mark, doesn't it? I can tell you that for the property that I run, we would have no problem supplying that information to a prospective renter, and in fact, we love it when prospective renters talk to any of our current residents. My fourth pointer for you is to check with local businesses. You will find some local business owners that were in business at that location in 2017 and 2019. Just ask the business owner a simple question. Did you flood with Hurricane Harvey in 2017 or with Storm Imelda in 2019? Do you know if the apartment complex right over there, that's the place you're looking at, flooded in 2017 or 2019? And my fifth pointer for you is to check the topography of the apartment complex. I'll explain that in a moment. Basically, you want to know if the apartment complex you're looking at is below the streets that surround it or is above those surrounding streets. For example, look at this video I took of an apartment complex I used to run. I'm not sure if you can see it, but the apartment complex is about 12 inches below street level. When I took this property over in 1994, all the underground drainage pipes were either falling apart or completely blocked. We spent over $1 million to redo all the drainage pipes at this property, but the property still flooded with the Memorial Day flood in May 2015. After that flood, we did several $100,000 worth of additional drainage work, but despite that, there was still some flooding in 2016 and again in 2017 with Hurricane Harvey. The reason for that was simple. Once all the drainage pipes were full of rainwater, as they sometimes are with the flooding rain, additional rainwater had no place to go, and so it stayed on the property and flooded low-lying apartments. Contrast the video you just saw with this video you see here. This is a video of Westview Forest Apartments, the property which I currently run. This time, I'm sure you can see that Westview Forest is about 2 to 3 feet above the adjoining street, which is Westview Road. If you actually visited Westview Forest, this height difference would be very, very obvious to you. In addition to being much higher than the neighboring streets, all the driveways at Westview Forest have been graded to drain to either Westview Road on the south or to Conrad Sauer on the west of the property. Therefore, regardless of how much it rains, Westview Forest simply cannot flood, as long as gravity exists, of course. In many cases, it's hard to tell if an apartment complex is higher or lower than the adjoining street, but in some cases, like the two we just discussed, it's pretty obvious. Finally, an almost foolproof way of making sure your own apartment doesn't flood, even if the property itself does flood, is to live on the second or higher floor. Of course, while doing that prevents your own apartment from flooding, if the apartment complex you live at floods, living there will still be a pretty unpleasant experience. In a future video, I will discuss some of the pros and cons of living downstairs or in an upstairs apartment. You might find some of the benefits and disadvantages somewhat surprising, especially if you haven't lived in apartments before. To summarize, although there are never any guarantees in life, I'm confident that if you use the 5 pointers that I just shared with you, there is a very good chance that whichever apartment complex you choose to rent at, the likelihood that your own apartment there will flood will be very low. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and watch my other videos as well. If you subscribe below, you'll be notified every time I drop a new video, and I usually drop 1 or 2 videos every week or so. And if you have a question, please leave it in the comments and I will answer your question in a future video. Thanks for watching. I hope this video has been helpful to you. The dog you see here knows that there are no shortcuts to finding an apartment, and he is out and about looking for the best place to call home. I will see you again in my next video, but until then, happy apartment hunting!